The expectation and the norm is to win, and that is what we will be able to do here. I believe in the power of UCLA.
It's a new day for UCLA football with new head coach Bob Chesney taking charge, and we need you to be a part of it. The right man is at the helm in Westwood, and the time is now for you to put your support behind the Bruins. UCLA football is ready to win, and we can't wait to see you this fall. Visit UCLABruins.com/tickets for more info on how to secure your seats for the 2026 season. Go Bruins!
Good afternoon. We're getting right down to business here. We are doing it live, doing more at 4 weekday afternoons, right after the Guy Benson Show and just before the 790 KBC News Blitz. Motec on Money, live on the air, 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com. And yep, the on-demand Motec on Money podcast, kbc.com. Apple, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, all your favorite podcast platforms. The war with Iran and oil continue to take the spotlight in the financial markets with more dramatic military action. In the news today, stocks moved higher, oil moved up, cryptos also rebounded with Bitcoin moving above 74,000. Haven't seen that in a while. Overnight, it was a nervous time in South Korea where their stock average, the Kospi index, plunged more than 12% for that index's worst loss in history. Uncertainty about the war in the Middle East sending prices in the financial markets up and down this week. The Kospi index tumbled more than 12% today, its worst ever single day of trading. Korean stocks have been hit by more than an 18% drop so far this week, on track for their biggest losses since 2008 during the financial crisis. Looks like this is largely related to what's happening in the Middle East with Korea, depending on oil imports, all of its fossil fuels, including oil and natural gas, all of it brought in by tanker. About 70% of Korea's oil imports and up to 30% of liquefied natural gas comes from the Middle East. By the way, the Kospi index in South Korea is still up more than 20% in 2026 and up 100% over the past 12 months. The price of oil did pull back slightly today after briefly topping $84 a barrel. The price of Brent crude in London, the international benchmark, settled to $81.40. And we saw in New York, the WTI oil price rose to $74.66. The Dow came in for a closing gain today of 238 points. The S&P 500 of 53. The NASDAQ of 291. Did get a couple of important readings on the economy. Growth for businesses in real estate, finance, and other services accelerated last month at the best pace seen since the summer of 2022. Also, another report from ADP, private employers survey, showed hiring picked up last month. On the military front, the U.S.-Iran war widened sharply after a U.S. submarine sank an Iranian warship off Sri Lanka, killing at least 80 people. NATO defense ministers also reported destroying an Iranian ballistic missile fired at Turkey, the first time Turkey's been drawn into the conflict. The escalation coming as the powerful son of Iran's slain supreme leader emerged as a front runner to succeed him as leader of Iran. We also heard from the Israeli military starting a new wave of strikes targeting military infrastructure in Tehran and in Washington. Lawmakers have voted against a war powers measure that would have limited President Trump's ability to order further military action in Iran. I'll discuss the dramatic developments impacting the financial markets, including the price of oil and gas, coming up later this hour, live with prominent oil industry analyst John Kilduff at Again Capital and CNBC contributor, longtime contributor to this program. And on the latest readings we got today on the economy, setting up for the Fed's next move, I'll be joined live later this hour by Mark Hamrick, Fed watcher, senior economic analyst at Bankrate, and their Washington bureau chief. Another very big story right here in California. A Republican leads the field of candidates for governor for the first time in nearly 20 years. Less than 3 months now before the California primary election. That Republican is Steve Hilton, business leader, well known nationally as host of Fox News' The Next Revolution. He's traveling the Golden State in a gold and blue pickup truck that says "Make California Golden Again." And he's introduced a new word to our vocabulary, Califordable, with affordability a big issue here in California. Steve Hilton, thank you very much for taking the call live with us here this afternoon.
Of course. Fantastic to be with you.
Wonderful to be with you. So much going on, but it's certainly big news here that you're at the top of the polls at the moment. Give us your view of things of California and the world here at the moment with so much going on.
Well, we're desperate for change in California, and that's what's being reflected here. And we're also seeing it on the road. I'm on the road, as you mentioned, all the time. We're doing these Cal Affordable town halls up and down the state. We got hundreds of people showing up each time, not just Republicans, but Democrats and independents. People are not that interested in politics, but they're sick of what a nightmare it is in California. Small business owners like I used to be, who are just sick of the struggle. That's the number one word I get from people is like, why is life in California such a struggle? Everything's so expensive. Everything's so difficult. You try and do anything, you're just completely drowning in ridiculous bureaucracy and rules and fees and permits and process, and it's a nightmare from all these different agencies, and that's what I'm fighting to change. And it's going to be a whole new day when I'm elected governor. I think it's hard to imagine what a change it will be, but I'm really excited about it, and I think that's why we're not just going to win the primary, but win the general election in November, because there's a couple of things we got going for us this year in California. First of all, we're going to get a real boost for the turnout, for Republican turnout in the general election by the news this week that voter ID has qualified for the ballot in November. That's incredibly important. Of course, voter ID is supported by a majority in California across the board, but actually it's really popular with Republicans. Republicans are going to come out and vote for that. And actually there's a chance that we're also going to get the Save Prop 13 initiative on the ballot as well to protect, to restore the taxpayer protections that have been undermined for year after year by the Democrats. And so those two things help us. The other big thing, honestly, look at the Democrat field. Look at the candidates they're putting up. Eric Swalwell, Katie Porter, Tom Steyer. These people are not the change we need in California. So I'm very, very confident that we can win this year. It's not going to be easy, but I know we can do it.
On the air live with Steve Hilton, the Republican candidate for governor, who, according to the latest polls, leads the pack here in California at the moment. And one of the candidates you mentioned is an outspoken critic of all things Prop 13. What about protecting that important tax protection measure here in California?
It's incredibly important because, of course, Prop 13 wasn't just about the original taxpayer revolt back in the 70s, Howard Jarvis, and of course, the Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association. I'm very close to them, and we talk all the time, and they've been fighting so hard. This was a ballot initiative, by the way, that was actually qualified for the ballot in 2024, Taxpayer Protection and Government Accountability Act, because Prop 13 it's mainly associated with property taxes and putting a cap on them, but it's also originally was a measure that made it much harder to raise local taxes, local increases in the sales tax, parcel taxes, all these things, where over the years, those protections have been whittled away. So you're seeing in counties and cities all across the state, these little increases that all add up to give us the highest taxes in the country. And we've got to restore those protections. So of course, we got to cut taxes in California. It's not enough just to stop them going up, which of course I want to do. But I've got a plan to reduce spending by cutting out the bloat and the corruption and the fraud in our government so that we can make your first $100,000 tax-free. That's my pledge, no state income tax under $100,000. And above $100,000, a flat tax of 7.5%, because we got to attract business back to California, because we've got the highest unemployment rate right now in the country because we're driving business away. So we've got a real job to do to get our economy back on track. But I think we can do it.
On the air live with Steve Hilton, Republican candidate for governor. Certainly gas and oil prices are very much in the news these days. And as you well know, 100 years ago, California accounted for 25% of the world's oil production. We're swimming in oil here. If you drive by the La Brea tar pits, you'll see oil coming right out of the ground there. That's all oil. And of course, a lot of the wealth that was originally built here in Southern California was built with oil money back in the 1920s.
Exactly. Just
look at Greystone Mansion in Beverly Hills and the Getty Center, which built a tremendous art collection at the 405 and Sunset Boulevard, and Occidental Petroleum, which was headquartered in Westwood up until recent years under Dr. Armand Hammer. So obviously, oil has been a big part of the history of California. And now we have refineries leaving here, and there's upward pressure on gas prices here dramatically. For years, they've been talking about we need to build more refineries. Now, just the opposite is happening. Refineries are closing. What would you do to turn the situation around for Mr. and Mrs. Southern California paying these outrageous prices at the gas pump here?
It's absolutely outrageous, and it's working-class Californians who are paying the most, who are suffering the most because they drive their cars the most. And it's not the climate warriors tapping away on their MacBooks and the work-from-home elite. It's regular working people. who are paying the most, and it's absolutely outrageous, and I'm determined to stop it. The driving force behind this is the insane war on California energy as part of their climate extremism, and they've been shutting down California oil production year after year after year, so that we've gone from a situation where we produce most of the oil that we use in California in-state. Now we import most of it. Nearly 80% is imported. Our number one provider, you talk about the Middle East, is Iraq right now. It's just completely insane. And now the good news is, and by the way, that's why you have the refineries closing, because the refineries are built to refine California crude. If you're not producing enough California crude, there's not enough business for them. And apart from all the other regulations, that's the main reason the refineries are closing. And so the answer here is to open up California oil and gas production. The good news is that as governor, I can do that because the way they've been shutting it down is through a particular agency of the state government, CalGEM, the California Department for Geologic and Energy Management. And that's a simple process there. Newsom's put in place all these climate fanatics that are denying permits to our oil industry for maintaining their wells and expanding them and drilling new wells in existing fields. All of that's going to change. It's almost an overnight change. I can kick out the climate fanatics, put in place pro-energy people in that agency and across state agencies, and tell them to give permits to the industry to even before they're asked for, so that we can really expand California production, get those refineries back, and lower gas prices that way.
On there live with
my
Steve
pledge,
Hilton.
by the way, I just want to say my specific pledge, and I think we can get there, is $3 gas. $3 gas in California. Now, look, I mean, most people around the country hear that and say, what's so good about that? Gas is under $3 in I think it's 40 states. But right now, of course, we're $5, heading even higher. So we got to get this down.
See it tonight, read about it tomorrow, but hear it now on Motec on Monday, live on the air with Steve Hilton. Of course, you're paying higher prices than Hawaii is, and that's in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. So under Republican Governor Pete Wilson and Republican Mayor Richard J. Reardon here in Los Angeles, we saw a pretty rapid recovery from the Northridge earthquake back in 1994. We're not seeing a rapid recovery under the current situation in the horrific firestorm disaster areas of the Palisades, Malibu, and Altadena. Tell us what needs to be done here to accelerate this. Some are calling this a second disaster, this ongoing painful recovery that's happening in those areas.
It's just infuriating and totally unacceptable. I spoke to Governor Wilson a number of times, actually, about how he handled that, and there's a lot of lessons there. But the simple lesson is that you've got to have a chief executive who just has that business mindset of not taking no for an answer, and just finding out what's going wrong, where the blockages are, and just calling people up and saying, hang on a second, why haven't you done this? I keep being, and this is the attitude, and I'll give you an encapsulation of the opposite, which is what we have from these machine politicians like Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass. There's a moment that really captured it. It was about 4 or 5 months into it, when Karen Bass made an announcement as LA mayor about rebuilding and permits and all the rest of it. And she made this announcement on her social media post. It said, I have just signed an executive order streamlining permitting so we can rapidly rebuild in LA. And it sounds good. Okay, fine. I agree with that. 4 months late, but whatever. I then watched the clip of her, what she actually said at the press conference. Here are the words she actually spoke. I have just signed an executive order tasking agency heads with developing paths forward to streamlining permitting. I think that's it. In a nutshell, that's why nothing happens, because you've got these bureaucratic, process-minded people who have no idea about what it takes to actually get things done, who don't have that problem-solving, can-do, what's the problem, let's get on with it kind of mindset. It's an attitude. That's why I think that it will be very different when I'm there, because I've got that mindset. That's most of my career has been in business. My first job was project manager for a construction company. You can't get away with that kind of BS in a job like that. The building won't get built. So it's just bringing that kind of attitude to all these processes and just saying, let's get on with it. And it's just so missing from every aspect of our governance in California, because after 16 years of one-party rule, you end up with these machine politicians like Newsom, like Karen Bass. It's like a conveyor belt of crappier and crappier machine politicians. And this is the result.
On the air live with Steve Hilton, leading candidate for governor here in California, Republican. And, of course, Californiability, you've introduced that word, largely focused on the housing cost as well as the homeless crisis here. I want to talk to you about that for just a moment. What is it going to take to to address the high cost of rent and properties here in California.
Yeah.
And what about the homeless crisis here, especially in the Los Angeles area?
Yeah, I very quick one I just want to mention is electric bills. I mean, for gas, we have the highest cost in the whole country, including Hawaii, everywhere apart from Hawaii. Again, that's because of their climate dogma, and that's going to end when I'm governor. So instead of this insane obsession with windmills and solar power and whatever, we're going to use California natural gas to fire our power stations, and that'll bring down rapidly the cost of electricity in California. In terms of housing, it's again the climate. It's a combination actually of the climate extremism, which is all of so the building codes in California are ridiculous. We're constantly making it tougher and tougher and making it more expensive to build. So that to build the exact same floor plan in California compared to neighboring states is 3 or 4 times as expensive. We can deal with that. You've got the labor regulations, all the concessions to the unions, including allowing unions to file all these environmental lawsuits that they then use as leverage to negotiate what they call project labor agreements, which massively increase the cost of construction. And then you've got their war on single-family homes. They've got this obsession with density. Everything has to be apartment buildings inside of the existing development footprint. And that's, A, it raises the cost of land, but B, it means that you can't actually give people what they want, which is single-family homes, especially when they want to have kids. And so all of that's going to change. We're going to make it much easier to build outwards rather than forcing apartment buildings endlessly into suburban neighborhoods, destroying their character. And we're going to get rid of these extreme regulations that make it so expensive to build.
On the homeless issue, certainly the Union Rescue Mission. I do a show with the CEO of the Union Rescue Mission once a week here on 790 KBC, Mark Hood, who I'm sure would love to connect with you. And certainly homeless men, women, children, and seniors on the streets of downtown are being helped by that organization. What do you think? What about supporting faith-based groups and others that have a proven track record?
Exactly, and there's a very important reason why. Because over 80% of the people who are living on the streets have either severe alcohol or drug addiction or mental health problems. And right now we have a law that was passed in 2016 in California. It's known as Housing First, which basically makes it illegal for any organization receiving state money for homelessness to require sobriety as a condition for shelter. So you're putting people into these, what they call these incredibly expensive units, $1 million, some of them cost each. They call it permanent supportive housing. They put them in these units, and if you're still addicted to drugs, you're going back out onto the street, you're using, you're dealing, it's a nightmare. So you're paying a huge amount of money, and the problem is never solved. Whereas it's the faith-based organizations that aren't subject to the kinds of rules that are actually doing the work to get people off of drugs, off of alcohol, and get their lives back on track. That's where we're going to focus the money when I'm governor.
Steve Hilton, thank you very much for joining us live here. We wish you Godspeed and safe travels around the state, and that beautiful pickup truck, the gold and blue truck. You got to bring it back to Beverly Hills sometime. That's the last time I saw it here, and I was thrilled to see it. So look forward to seeing you back here in the Los Angeles area as soon as possible as you continue your travels around the state. Steve Hilton, thank you very much for joining us live this afternoon.
Great to be with you. Thanks.
Likewise. Thank you very kindly. And
every day, excessive delays and denials from big insurers keep patients from accessing the care they need. And when care is urgent, these delays can be disastrous. These practices cost billions in wasteful spending, driving up costs for American families. But while big insurers put up barriers, America's hospitals and health systems are in your corner, navigating endless reviews and appeals to get you the care you need when you need it most. It's time to curb these harmful practices and put the focus back on patients. Brought to you by the Coalition to Strengthen America's Healthcare.
The expectation and the norm is to win, and that is what we will be able to do here. I believe in the power of UCLA.
It's a new day for UCLA football with new head coach Bob Chesney taking charge, and we need you to be a part of it. The right man is at the helm in Westwood, and the time is now for you to put your support behind the Bruins. UCLA football is ready to win, and we can't wait to see you this fall. Visit UCLABruins.com/tickets for more info on how to secure your seats for the 2026 season. Go Bruins!
An update for the stock market and what's been a tumultuous week. The Dow 238 points, 48,739. The S&P 500 of 53 at 6869. The NASDAQ of nearly 300 at 22,807. The volatility index pulling back today by 10%. Gold at 5,166 and change. Oil in focus, moving higher, up $1.35 at 76.01 a barrel in New York at the moment. Bitcoin got a rise today, moving above 74,000 for the first time in a while. Right now hovering at around 72.5. Ethereum is back above 2,100 at 21.27 here at the moment. Doge at the moment at 9 cents. Oil company stocks pulling back a bit. ExxonMobil down 2 and change to 149.82. Chevron down nearly 3 at 186.03. In the tech space, we see NVIDIA moving higher today by $2.99 at 183 and change. Strategy, that's the Michael Saylor's outfit that's focused on Bitcoin. It's been rebounding lately as Bitcoin rebounded today up nearly $14 at 146 and change. The Bitcoin ETF IBIT moving higher by nearly $3 at 41.44. Apple down $1.23 at 262 and change. Tesla up more than $13 at 405.94. Motec on Money continues on 790 KBC. The war with Iran and oil continued to take the spotlight in the financial markets. We're watching the price of oil spike this week, gas prices along with it. Let's bring in prominent oil industry analyst John Kilduff at Again Capital and CNBC contributor. John Kilduff, it's been a while since we chatted behind live microphones. Give us your reaction to the dramatic developments over the weekend and where things stand here at the moment.
Yeah, Frank, good to speak with you again. It's been staggering, really. Leading off with the killing of Ayatollah Khamenei was just really next level. And now already you're seeing where we had been worried, where I had been concerned to a lesser degree about the Iranians taking steps to close the Strait of Hormuz. It turns out we didn't need the Iranians for that. Our good old international insurance companies have taken the lead on foiling sailings through the strait by either pulling their insurance or making the cost prohibitive. I will say that President Trump coming out yesterday offering backstop insurance from the U.S. And or naval escorts helped calm the waters, if you will, to a degree in the market. But we're back up over $1 again tonight, over $75 for WTI, well over 80 for Brent. And unfortunately, I saw later this afternoon that the national average for diesel fuel is now over $4 a gallon. If there's anything that's an inflation exaggerator, it's that. Because everything, you can buy all you want on the internet, Frank, as you know, but it's got to make it to your house via a truck. And that truck is usually powered by diesel fuel. Everything at the front of the supermarket, the produce aisle, all of that, diesel fuel dependent, diesel fuel infused, if you will, and the pricing in those aisles will reflect that immediately. So, this is already going on a little longer, I think, than the markets, Frank, were expecting. Now we're in day 4. It could go for weeks, and some of the weaponry are now the volumes of it are being called into question. So the oil market has been, I think, relatively measured in the price response. But the longer we go, where there's no transiting of the Strait of Hormuz by vessels, this becomes a major problem, and we're going to be veering towards a full-blown energy crisis.
See it tonight, read about it tomorrow, but hear it now on Motec on Money, live on the air with John Kilduff, oil industry analyst at Again Capital and CNBC contributor. Among the dramatic developments today, a U.S. Navy submarine sank an Iranian warship in the Indian Ocean. It looks like the war is intensifying as the U.S. and Israel have intensified their bombardment of Iran's forces. And now, for the first time since World War II, a U.S. submarine using a torpedo sank an enemy vessel. What about that big news today and concern about, as you mentioned, the insurance business, insuring tankers and other ships in the region, this dramatic development involving the submarine?
Yeah, what's more dramatic about that, Frank, is that where it occurred, as you just referenced, off the coast of Sri Lanka. I mean, if you look at a map, it's pretty darn far away from the Persian Gulf and Iran. So obviously the tentacles and the theater of this war is remarkable. Almost on a world war type scale. So that's what's problematic here, I think, as we look ahead. And, I always try to be very measured about this. I've gone through so many of these Middle East crises. I can't even tell you. But this one's definitely ramping up. I will say that the Iranian defenses have been degraded significantly. And right now, the U.S. and Israel are flying at will over Iran. So, that's a good sign in terms of trying to see the end of this thing. But the problem we have is that the Middle East countries don't have really, as much as they talk a big game, Frank, they have production problems almost immediately in situations like this. They can't store their oil once they take it out of the ground. They have to get it out and get it onto a ship and get it into these days, mostly to Asia. So Iraq, for example, is already shutting in production. The Saudis may have to start to do that as well. The Kuwaitis are also signaling that they're going to have to do it. If they all do that, you can't just flip a switch on these things. They're very sort of delicate fields, and it takes a while to ramp this production back up. So this could be lasting. I will tell you that the oil market will discount right away any sort of cessation in hostilities, so it won't be that bad. But will we get back down to the low 50s in crude oil like we had seen just several weeks ago? It's going to take a while now, Frank.
On the air live with John Kilduff, oil industry analyst, and Iran shooting missiles all over the place, including hitting a Saudi oil installation, the world's largest, right? And now it looks like Saudi Arabia and other countries in that region that have been hit by Iranian fire will retaliate. What do you see happening there? And it looks like Iran's capabilities, missile capabilities, are being degraded dramatically, but they're still getting some missiles off here.
They are, Frank, and that's part of the problem here in the calculus now is just how asymmetrical Iran's response is going to be. I will tell you that from what people we talk to and the like, the Saudis are a hair away from getting involved heavily in this situation and going after Iran. That the last hit that they took on what's called Abqaiq and Ras Tanura, those are the big names to watch out for if you're monitoring this. The largest refinery in the world, one of the largest storage facilities in the world, and really what I call sometimes the world's oil aorta. It gets all the Saudi oil out onto the global market. So a big issue there, and the Saudis are prepared, it looks like, to get, like I said, get into this thing big time. So where do the Iranians, hit next? Who do they hit? And will it be the type of retaliation that only invites more and makes things get a lot worse before they can even hope and get a vision on getting it better?
And as we just spoke with our previous guest, the leading candidate for governor in California wants to improve the gas and oil situation here in California by encouraging fossil fuel production once again because of the crazy situation here with the refineries and other issues. Are we continuing to get oil and all this from Iraq and even Venezuela? And what about the unique situation here in California?
Well, the problem you have with Iraq, if you were looking at that map, that Strait of Hormuz, Iraq is north of that. So their oil can't get out right now. The Kuwaiti oil can't get out right now. The Saudi oil can't get out right now, or the bulk of it. So, that's a problem. As far as California goes, there may be hope, Frank. I can tell you here in New York, Governor Hochul's trying to walk back some of the climate-related, energy-damaging policies from a few years ago. Where I think people are waking up to just how important the energy aspect is to our economy. You keep hearing about it. It just drives me crazy about how less energy focused our economy is. It's still there. It's what people react to the most. If these gasoline prices get back over $3 on a national average, for example, the way diesel has already gone, you're going to see a big hit to consumer confidence. You'll see consumer spending pull in, not just because it's going into fuel a gas tank, but just because people are going to be nervous and downtrodden. And it's just a big negative when they start to see gas prices at the pump, tick up the way they're going to. They've only just begun to go up, by the way, Frank. So watch out for that. But the Venezuelan oil is a good news story. All I can tell you is that your situation is getting a lot of attention, to go back to it for a minute, and the price you're already paying at the pump. And so there are efforts and things that are being sort of maneuvered potentially to get more fuel your way, even from Canada, who's looking to take advantage of it. But like we've been talking about, Frank, for some time now, you are going to have to source fuel probably from Asia now that those two refineries have gone by the board. That governor candidate, one of the things he should do is to nationalize on a state level, if you will, one of those two properties and get them back going.
On the air live with John Kilduff, oil industry analyst, again, Capital and CNBC contributor. From an investment standpoint, John Kilduff, where would you be placing your bets at this point?
Well, Frank, obviously the oil stocks performed as you would think. We talked about these being event risk portfolio measures, and that's exactly what they've turned into. At this point here, I can't advocate getting involved. They've gotten a price bump higher based on all this conflict and the potential for these prices to stick around higher for a while. It's a sort of a knee-jerk reaction. The refiners also getting a big pop here because if you think crude oil's gone up a lot, gasoline and diesel fuel are outpacing it by quite a bit already. That's partly because of that crude oil being shut in the Persian Gulf. It goes to make a lot of diesel around the world. So, we're paying for that. So at this point, Frank, I got to tell you to stay on the sidelines regarding the energy names. I will say that the companies that are getting hit bad right now are sort of the transportation companies, your cruise lines, your airlines, those sorts of companies. They got hit hard the first days of the world of this war, and they have rebounded somewhat. But I think they're going to get hit some more as these prices, crude oil prices and gasoline prices go higher. I would buy them on the dips. I would trim any length you have in the Exxon Mobils, the Chevrons, and the like here as those stock prices tick higher, and just wait for the dust to literally settle here.
John Kilduff, thank you again very much for that thorough assessment of the situation at this moment, and look forward to speaking with you quite a bit. It looks like these days. We'll keep an open line to you. That is prominent oil industry analyst John Kilduff at Again Capital and CNBC contributor, longtime contributor to this program. We so appreciate it, John. Thank you very much for joining us live here this afternoon.
My pleasure, Frank. Thank you.
The expectation and the norm is to win, and that is what we will be able to do here. I believe in the power of UCLA.
It's a new day for UCLA football with new head coach Bob Chesney taking charge, and we need you to be a part of it. The right man is at the helm in Westwood, and the time is now for you to put your support behind the Bruins. UCLA football is ready to win, and we can't wait to see you this fall. Visit UCLABruins.com/tickets for more info on how to secure your seats for the 2026 season. Go Bruins!
Thanks very much. 790 KABC. Motec Money continues here on 790 KABC. A couple of important readings on the economy out today. The services sector, surging to more than a 3.5-year high in the month of February as businesses rebuild inventories in expectation of strong demand. That appears to be consistent with hopes of an acceleration in economic growth this quarter. But as we just heard from our previous guest, the Middle East poses a downside risk to the picture sketched today by the Institute for Supply Management survey we got. Gas prices have surged by at least 20 cents a gallon nationwide since the U.S. and Israel launched air attacks on Iran last weekend. The other important reading we got today on the job front ahead of the big enchilada of monthly economic reports that'll be coming out on Friday. The monthly jobs report we get from the Labor Department today was the ADP private employment survey showing companies added 63,000 workers in the month of February, an improvement from the downwardly revised 11,000 in January and better than most economists had expected. Keeping track of all of this closely and what this could mean to interest rates when the Fed holds its next meeting. Joining us live now is longtime business journalist Mark Hamrick, senior economic analyst at Bankrate.com, also serves as their Washington bureau chief, also a Fed watcher. Mark Hamrick, thank you very much for joining us live here this afternoon.
Good to be with you, my friend. Thank you, Frank.
Wonderful to have you with us here, Mark. You're the right man for the job here. And give us your take on the latest readings we got here, and now with the war with Iran raging, give us your view of things here at the moment.
Yes, well, past is prologue before this war started, and so the question really at this point is how quickly does the narrative shift with what is happening with the economy? And unfortunately, we'll only know that as we get further data. And of course, even the monthly employment report that we get this coming Friday from the Bureau of Labor Statistics will be a snapshot from around the 12th of the month of February. And so what we do know, based on the ADP data you just referred to, the ISM the services data that we got today, they suggested essentially a steady as she goes approach broadly, but even the services sector now accelerating. And so that's obviously very welcome news. The ADP reading is very consistent with what we've been seeing for some time, Frank, and that is it's a low hire, low fire job market. And so, adding 60+ thousand jobs here, nothing to sneeze at, but we can remember not that long ago where it was, a regular feature of economic data to see jobs creation in the neighborhood of 150,000 jobs a month or more.
On there live with Mark Hamrick at bankrate.com. And Mark, what about the latest inflation readings we got and are getting in the days ahead here, and also the big enchilada monthly economic reports on Friday? The Fed, of course, will be paying attention to those two readings since that's what they're focused on. What's your expectation on inflation at this point and on the jobs report we're going to be getting on Friday?
Well, unfortunately, once we get into a situation where we're measuring the effects of this war and the higher gasoline prices and all the many things that filters on through to affect, like airline fares, farm costs, transportation, you can't avoid transportation costs in this economy when you're talking about the goods sector. So I think the risk is that inflation goes higher from here. The duration and impact of the war we cannot predict, but this is yet another bit of fog that's been injected into our environment where, we had a heavy dose of that with the tariffs announced last April. We had another round of tariffs announced by the president, which, by the way, have risen in recent days from the 10% level to the 15% level. So much uncertainty, so much disruption, so much volatility. And to Mr. Kilduff's point earlier, that weighs on confidence and sentiment, and those are not the recipes for economic or financial success. The main takeaway, though, coming into all this is the U.S. economy and broadly measured consumers have proven much more resilient than people would have given them credit. But I do worry that if we have sustained higher gasoline prices, that then adds more literally fuel to the inflation fire. That is a bridge too far, and all that, of course, heading into midterm elections this fall.
On there live with Mark Hamrick, senior economic analyst at bankrate.com, and you have a front row seat there in Washington to the Federal Reserve chair's news conferences and have for many years. And when you speak with him and he answers, it could be a market-moving event, every comment. And that's how I feel when I speak to you, Mark. Everything you say could potentially move the markets here. So what about what do you think the Fed's next move will be? Will they stand pat? And of course, then the Fed chairman, the current one, is on his way out. And then Kevin Warsh could be approved as the next Fed chair. What's happening with all that?
So thank you for your kind words. 2 more meetings to be chaired by Chairman Powell, and then we presume that that nomination will eventually be confirmed. And I think Chairman Powell, if he sticks to the playbook that we've seen so many times before, he's going to say there's too much uncertainty to be making a confident decision about interest rates in the current environment. Of course, what the current environment is today could be different a week, a month from now. We've seen that with geopolitical and other events going back to 2020 and even well before that. But the Fed is not inclined to move interest rates in this environment. It really does need to see how the data unfolds. And so, 2-3 meetings at least, I think they're on hold, barring the tremendously unforeseen.
All right, and then there is the tariff story. It's been a while since we chatted behind live microphones, since the Supreme Court struck down some of the president's tariff ideas, and he switched to the 10%, and now, as you mentioned, now 15%. What, as it turns out, is the impact of tariffs on inflation? It wasn't the catastrophe that some had predicted, now possibly refunding tariff money and so forth.
Right.
How's that playing out?
Even in the Beige Book survey, which, as you know so well, Frank, is prepared for the next Federal Reserve meeting, there was evidence from their business contacts that we're still seeing these costs being passed through. And when we had another reading in recent days with respect to what was fueling one measure of inflation, one of those things was essentially higher profit margins for wholesalers, which then, as we know, eventually finds its way to consumers being charged higher costs. So you're right. We survived the tariffs that were imposed last year. We do know that the clock is ticking on the authority that was used to reimpose them, because without approval of Congress, that authority only lasts 150 days at a time. But I also think this is a primary tool that the president likes to use, almost like a driver in golf, and I'd be surprised if he puts it back in his bag. He'll just find another way to hit that tariff golf ball down the fairway.
Mark, thank you very much for joining us live here. That's Mark Hamrick, Senior Economic Analyst at Bankrate.com, live with us here on Motac on Money on 790 KABC, Los Angeles.
The expectation and the norm is to win, and that is what we will be able to do here. I believe in the power of UCLA.
It's a new day for UCLA football with new head coach Bob Chesney taking charge, and we need you to be a part of it. The right man is at the helm in Westwood, and the time is now for you to put your support behind the Bruins. UCLA football is ready to win, and we can't wait to see you this fall. Visit UCLABruins.com/tickets for more info on how to secure your seats for the 2026 season. Go Bruins!